What is going on, everybody? Welcome for the first time or back to another dljworks video. And this video today is titled Learning Strategies and Suggestions for Coding and Programming. Now, this is somewhat of a training teaching video I decided to do, and actually it came from a commenter on a video that I did called The Black Struggle in Technology, which I will go ahead and show you guys right now. Now, this is a video I actually highly recommend that you guys, when you have time, to check out. It's just me providing some commentary over a news article and talks about blacks in technology. But one of the commenters by the name of Brian Glaze, which I told him I'd give him a shout out because he gave me this idea. And we got in a nice little dialogue conversation in the comment section, as you can see here. And then I'll just go ahead and kind of read what he says here in this comment. I thought about getting into some of the front end development as well. I started learning because the field seems interesting and I think the applications are bountiful. I'm not actively learning for a job yet, but I definitely have it in mind. Thanks for the encouragement. You might have already made it, but a video about the learning strategies you found helpful could be nice. And so here we are today in this video, because when he suggested it, I actually just knew that this could be very helpful, not just to what he suggested, but to somebody else out there that is just looking for different types of information when it comes to coding and programming, especially learning types and that sort of thing. So I hope that you really find this helpful. I really wanted to come from a different angle, as there are many videos about how you can actually learn coding easily, but I really do hope I provide a different perspective on this subject. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. Now, a disclaimer. These ideas and strategies come from my own experience, research, and practice. They are not the end-all be-all, so use it at your discretion. Anything that I suggest and say in this training is not set in stone, okay? Anything that I actually provide here online in terms of advice, information, is for you to take what is useful to you and just discard the rest. And actually, if there's anything that's conflicting or you feel like I'm giving some misinformation for, then I would just highly recommend you leave a comment below or a question, and love to have a conversation with you in the comment section, just like I did with my boy Brian. But let's keep going. So let's get the obvious out the way. Everybody learns differently. I did not make this video to focus on everybody's different types of learning styles. I get the whole audio, visual, kinesthetic, hands-on approach. I get that. I wanted to go ahead and just address this, that I'm very much aware that many people learn differently. And when it comes to coding, for me personally, the hands-on approach was the best sort of practice that actually helps me to absorb and really understand the syntax, the language, and actually doing offline reading as well. But I'll get deeper into that as we continue on into this training. So a key ingredient to becoming great at coding is, drum roll, simple application. Now, application for me, and when I talk about application, I'm talking about everything that you're absorbing, all the information that you're reading, the constant hours that you're sitting, and maybe you're doing a team treehouse course, or you're taking somebody's course on some basic coding, whether it's some web coding, scripting, HTML, CSS, JavaScript, hardcore programming languages such as Java, C#, whatever the case may be. Application is the key thing. Everything that you take in, you have to apply it. You have to put it in practice. This is paramount in coding. It may be different for you, but for me, it has been the key foundation. All right. And with that comes a very simple formula. Absorbing information, putting it into practice, which will equal into coding proficiency. That's really it. That's what really coding boils down to. Anything that you're learning from a textbook, from trying to solve a problem, seeking something out on Stack Overflow, and in terms of solving small components, large components, whatever the problem, no matter how big or small the problem is, you absorbing that information, putting it into practice, trying to figure it out. That's what's going to really and truly develop your coding proficiency. So there's no overly complex thing to this. It's just really putting your nose down to the concrete and just grinding. I don't even know if I actually said that expression correctly, but correct me in the comment section below. This is the foundation. This is going to be the foundation. So two ways I categorize learning how to code. One is offline, and through offline you have things such as books. So as you guys can see, this is my whole library of web design and development books that I've collected over the years since about 2011 and just been studying hardcore. They've been very, very much so pertinent to my development into this field. And a lot of people like to be dismissive of textbooks. You can just get all this online, Stack Overflow, yeah. Then the reality for me is I'm not always on a computer, and sometimes I just like to crack open a book and just read and soak in and think about certain concepts, which when I get back on a computer, those skills just easily translate. And for me, working offline, it supports my online work. So I still recommend textbooks, and they've been very helpful, especially the Adobe Classroom and the book. And you just practice those exercises. I just still find it helpful. A lot of people may disagree, but yeah, I still find them helpful. Handwritten rough drafting, if you're trying to, for example, create a website, a basic visualization, sketching, drawing some basic shapes, some blocks, some circles to represent what the navigation bar is going to look like, the user interface, how people are going to actually use the website. That's still very much helpful. Okay. I don't oftentimes just sit in front of a computer all day trying to actually code or design. Most of this stuff takes place offline. And a lot of the times I'm writing the code out handwritten so I can actually see, and kind of my brain could kind of work and look to see how am I going to solve a particular problem or overcome a challenge. You could do print cheat sheets, reference guides. There's something that was printed up by O'Reilly. There was like a little JavaScript cheat sheet for syntax, what variables are, functions, how to just do the basics. All right, old school note taking and rapid visualization, which I made a video about my whole process with that, and I'll leave the link for that video in the description below as well. The next thing is going to be offline. All right, so I'm sorry, not offline, but online. So online things that you can actually do when you're trying to learn how to code is online courses, Treehouse, Code Academy, Coding Phase. So shout outs to Joe on that channel. YouTube videos, Stack Overflow, websites that address techniques such as CSS tricks. Shout out to Chris Coyer. Wonderful WordPress resource. I'll leave in a description below as well for that. I am an affiliate for that resource, so I just want to go ahead and put that out there. But it's been wonderful, and if you're into WordPress, then that resource would be very much so to help you out as well. Copy and paste code, modify it to fit your needs, which I will talk even deeper about that in this later training of this lesson. So best ways to apply acquired coding knowledge. Projects, and more projects. I cannot stress this enough. This has been key okay, so let me say this. There's a lot of information that's out there on the internet, and it could be very overwhelming for you to figure out where you need to start at. If you're trying to get into web design and development, for example, somebody may tell you to, if you're trying to just do design, you don't have to learn HTML or CSS. Just worry about design fundamentals, the basics, visual hierarchy, all that other good stuff. Somebody else may tell you, hey, you need to learn HTML and decide what you actually need to do. My actual advice is going to be for you to find some sort of project. Create either a project for yourself. Maybe you want to recreate the front page of Facebook or your favorite website, or a family member, friend needs a website, an application done. You want to take on a project. Those projects are going to help guide your learning. They're going to help you decide what exactly you need to learn, so you don't have to sit up here and just scour the internet for all types of training and get lost in the mix and the shuffle. Projects will help guide your learning. They've given me a lot of direction, and a lot of this stuff that I've learned has been key. It is one of the reasons why I'm not really deep into knowing JavaScript, because I have yet to just do a project that required me to actually know a lot about JavaScript. And a lot of things that I need JavaScript for, somebody has already written that code, and I just actually use that code and I modify it. I either copy and paste it, I modify it, I make it my own, because I read a lot of the JavaScript from just textbooks and just analyzing code online, and that's a skill that I've actually picked up. So projects will help guide your learning, no matter how big or small. Start out small. What does small look like? Maybe a simple 4-page website. Maybe if you're doing a phone application, learning some iOS code or whatever the case may be in that dev kit. you have to make that decision, but you want to decide what project you want to do and see what the requirements are for you to get that project done. Cannot stress this enough. So what are projects? Okay, and I talked about this a little bit in the last slide, but I get a little bit more specific here. But building entire websites or mobile applications, creating functionality such as CSS and JavaScript animations, that would be scroll and hover effects. Those are the types of functionalities that I'm actually talking about, because they require that you write little snippets of code to create those functions. And you can just attach them to any website that you need. Interactive website components such as shopping carts for e-commerce, form filling, creating libraries as shortcuts for application functions, plugins for WordPress, and frameworks and templates. These are the types of projects you could take on. It's not always just trying to do a website for Sally down the street. You can actually, if you're trying to create functionalities and you're trying to actually build tools so you can continue to work, and they do this in game development a lot. They build engines before they actually even start working on the game to make it easier for them to complete the work that they actually need to. So it's kind of like doing all the work up front, so you can minimize the work down the road and make it a lot easier for yourself. Just like if you're creating some sort of hover effect that you want to do for a particular website, you create that hover effect with maybe some CSS and JavaScript, and this hover effect is going to be consistent throughout the menu selection and any other button that you're going to create on a particular website. So that's what I meant. Anything can actually be a project in this scope, and it's even more to it than just this. Okay, so another actually learning technique that I actually would suggest is working backwards. What do I mean by this? Okay, so here we have a basic rough sketch of a website. We have a bar that says that's going to be the navigation menu. Here, two left and right side, maybe some text here and the actual image next to the text, image wrapped into that text. And then we have here something that will represent a footer. This is very, very rough. Okay, so working backwards means that you're doing some rapid visualization. You're visualizing first, creating that visual to help kind of guide you and to see how you're going to create this website or create this application. And then second, you're going to code. So that would mean that once you actually have the visual stuff down, the visual hierarchy and how you want your information to be structured and how it's going to be relative to what your client or what that company or whatever the quest may be, if you're trying to create an application or a website to produce revenue, then the information has to be placed on that website or application in a specific order to appeal to consumer psychology and those sorts of things. So once you actually have that figured out, you want to go ahead and figure out what code will it take to create each of these components, each of these elements on top of your web page. So this is what I mean by working backwards. This is another learning strategy that you can apply when you're actually coding. So you want to seek out challenges and problems. Now, a lot of people like to use the terms challenges and problems as interchangeable definitions, which oftentimes they can be, but there is a huge difference between these. So I have something written down to explain the difference between challenges and problems. I actually have a little graphic organizer to kind of show you, but this is something I also found too on a website called differencebetween.com. This is a real website, but they actually wrote something down that actually agrees with my whole train of thought on this matter. So it actually says that most people consider challenges and problems to be synonymous, as both create a barrier for the individual. This, however, is a misconception. A challenge is vastly different from a problem. It can even be stated that our outlook plays a decisive role in identifying something as a challenge or a problem. The key difference between a challenge and a problem is that while a challenge is a demanding task that an individual wishes to overcome, a problem is something difficult to deal with or understand that hinders the progress of the individual. All right, so why I have that definition in mind, that pretty much gave a really good overview, which is why I wanted to tap into that website, because when I was actually doing even further research, I had certain things written down, but that actually added even more of an overview to the difference between a challenge and a problem. Some other things that I actually added to this is that when you're seeking out challenges and problems, challenges can be relative to your skill level, may not hinder your progress. If you quit the task, it will not have any effect whatsoever on you moving forward. So what do I actually mean by this? A challenge can be and I'll get into some examples in the next slide, but just to kind of give you a taste of what I'm talking about, a challenge can actually be maybe a simple exercise. It's a little bit above where you're at, okay? And if you taking on that challenge or not is really not going to affect your forward progress, because it's just something that's offered and it's just completely optional for you to raise your skill level if you so desire to do so, okay? Which is why I say it can be optional. You may not learn anything new, but you can also strengthen your current skills. So what can I say? For example, you may be, let's say you're writing some basic HTML right now. All right, you don't know anything about Canvas or anything like that, but you already know about HTML in terms of maybe writing some video tags and audio tags. You know some basics to those, but you're now using those tags in a very different way that you didn't know how to actually use those tags before. So I guess technically in a way you are kind of learning something new, but not new in a sense to where you're learning a completely different definition or vocabulary there in that syntax. You're learning how to actually use this even more. So I guess in a way that is kind of new, but that's not what I actually meant in that context. So with problems, problems can oftentimes demands your skills to be at a certain place. It can hinder your progress if you don't actually solve this problem. If a problem arises, this can actually really be a block, just as it said in that definition I was reading on that website, differencebetween.com. And if you don't actually overcome this, you won't move forward. And it's demanding, it's requiring you that you solve this in order for you to accomplish the goal that you actually need to. Which is why I say it's not optional, it's required to overcome. And majority of the times you are coming out more experienced than before. And it's the same way in a challenge. If you overcome a certain particular challenge, so they could be interchangeable in that way, but there are some key differences between a challenge and a problem. So the similarities between the two, it will stretch your coding capabilities and will bring you outside of your comfort zone. That is some key similarities that I actually see with challenges and problems that kind of make them synonymous and interchangeable. But let's really break this down for what this looks like in a coding scenario. How does this apply to coding? Okay, some coding challenge examples. All right, training simulations, practice courses or exercises, such as what you will find on Team Treehouse and any other coding course website. Assessments to measure your skills. So on LinkedIn, they actually allow you to take these coding assessments. Now, I just took a CSS one. I didn't have to. It was optional, but I decided to actually take it because I thought this can actually help my career. It wasn't really the test itself, and the results aren't something I just was required to pass. It's just going to help further. It's a supplemental aid. So and when people actually see that, I was like, oh, okay, he's really skilled at doing CSS. So I'm gonna do more coding challenges and assessments on that soon. But for now, that's just what it is. It was a challenge for me. All right. Coding challenges can also be manufactured problems to simulate what if scenarios. So think of X-Men in a danger room. That's the best example I can actually think of, but that goes back to the training simulations. You want to have maybe some mock problems so it could kind of prepare you for those real life dilemmas you may have when you're actually in a real work environment with a company. So, and hackathons are usually when somebody's trying to build an application, maybe a game, whatever the case may be, you're trying to challenge yourself to see if you can build something in a short amount of time. It's completely optional, but the opportunity and the results that you achieve and some of the opportunities you'll get from participating in a hackathon and having your own self hackathon and get something done in a very condensed amount of time, it's just, oh man, the rewards can just be phenomenal. They can just be phenomenal. So these are just some coding challenge examples. Let's look at some coding problem examples. Projects that require deadlines, buggy code that requires a solution, special functionality upon client requests. So clients are always requesting, especially if they don't know anything about technology, they're always requesting these crazy features that have no business being on a website or any sort of web application that make no sense whatsoever. So that's a problem. That's a problem. Your solution is to either give the client what they want or be in the client's best interest by expressing to them, look, my web expertise, my experience suggests that this is not the right move to just throw this flying animation all over your website because you just think it looks cool. your users aren't going to really understand that, and you're going to experience a high percentage drop off in your traffic because of this one stupid animated feature. So keep that in mind. Special functionality to achieve a monetary result. Then if you're building a website, maybe a real estate website, or you're building a blog for somebody, and they need, to take in some information, and they need that website to parse the information, do something special with it that will put it to email. I'm saying something complex, but that's really what it is. It's really just trying to create a special functionality. It's either going to automate something, find leverage to something, and make this whole monetization method simplified. Okay, websites can become hacked. Your coding skills are going to have to step up and figure out how you can, clean out the bad code or some bad JavaScript, some very dangerous pirate JavaScript that somebody has implanted into your website. Web applications are malfunctioning, and software becomes infected and requires a coding cleanup. So these are some coding problem examples that require you to find some creative way to solve them. And if you don't, it can either maybe cost you your job, maybe delay your career progression, and it could also just look bad on you if you don't kind of find a way. You may not have the answer, but you have to look for an answer, and that's what coding is all about. You're not going to know everything. I obviously don't know everything, but I really work hard to try to think outside the box and find a solution to solve these problems. So speaking of thinking outside the box, let's continue to look forward at that. Another method that really got shunned, and this was from a website. A lot of people really don't recommend copy and pasting code. It's typically seen, I actually meant to say it's typically not seen as a good practice, but a hack job. So I wrote that incorrectly, so my bad. However, it can be advantageous. So if you do this, I suggest you take the work backwards approach. It's like assembling a car and putting it back together again to understanding how it works. All right. So if you're copy and pasting code, you just don't want to arbitrarily copy and paste code and just throw your arms up and just hope and pray everything just works out well. No, you have to, when you're copy and pasting code, you have to know exactly what you're attaching this code to. What is it connected to? How is it going to affect the rest of your website? If it's, you're copy and pasting some CSS because you're styling something and you want it to look a certain way, you have to make sure that you're attaching it to the proper tags in your HTML code, or your class names, your PHP code. If it's on a WordPress website, you have to be able to read and do all of these things. My main specialty is taking WordPress websites and restyling them by actually looking at the CSS code and looking at a special function that somebody else wrote. I'm like, oh, that's a cool effect. I'll copy and paste that effect and, take it and modify it. And I'm familiar with pretty much the hierarchy of how the PHP code is written. So I analyze the IDs and the class names into that code, and I'll make those modifications like that. So you have to be able to have that sort of skill level if you're interested in doing that. Test yourself by reading and modifying any parts of the code to create a different functionality, or at the very least changing the name. Like, get in the habit of reading some code if you're copy and pasting it, and changing the name of some of the class names and IDs. But this comes from you studying and you being familiar with what those things are. Pinpoint key parts of that code to use separately for a different function. So maybe you'll take a function where it's a simple loop or an if-then statement if it's JavaScript, and maybe it's doing one thing, but you need it to do something else to work differently for your website. So that's kind of what I mean in that sort of realm. So copy and pasting code could be a good thing. It's not, many people will say against it. It's probably better for you to just write it directly from scratch. But hey, if you're in a process of learning, it just, I'm not even gonna say just hack. It kind of, that's what you're doing though, but it's a temporary solution. That's all I can really tell you right now, and it's gonna really help build your learning style. All right, that's the main thing I can tell you in terms of copy and paste. This helped me a lot in understanding code and disassembling it, just like you would if you was taking a device and trying to see how it works by breaking it all down. All right, some indirect coding supports, what I was alluding to earlier. Okay, so now I have a beef with certain people who just, all the programming eggheads out there, all the senseis, the Yodas, they swear up and down by mathematics, which I'm not refuting at all. That's not why I'm saying that when I say I have a beef, but people like to downplay the art of reading. Okay. The reason I even have reading classic literature on here, when you're reading complex, dense pieces of literature, such as by Edgar Allan Poe, Joseph Conrad, Heart of Darkness, anything by William Shakespeare, David Foster Wallace. He's not really considered a classic, author, but his works, his reading works are very dense. They're very complex. They require a higher level of thinking. So I have added his name into this. Mark Twain, Jonathan Swift. When you're reading classic literature, okay, if you actually read any unabridged works by these guys, you're looking at the language, you're analyzing key words and seeing how the vocabulary fits. How do they make these words work together? How are they creating a story from the type of syntax that they're using from their own language? Like it's reading my whole training in literature and my English major training upbringing has helped me so much in being able to analyze and read and identify key things in code that other people just wouldn't have that skill available to them. So that's why I'm recommending that you read classic literature, because it's going to train your brain and give you that stamina to do so. Some other key things that I say is solve riddles, which will build up your logistical understanding and reasoning. Study modal logic, which comes from area of philosophy. So you can do your own research on that. I won't get into too deep about modal logic. Stay abreast. Stay in a breath. Stay abreast in the depths of standard algebra and geometry, because you want to get familiar. A lot of programming borrows from the language of algebra and geometry. You're talking about variables, you're talking about algorithms. That's a no-brainer there. That is pretty much a given. But if you stay in practice of that, you understand the steps in solving basic math problems, and that'll be a practice that'll actually carry over into your coding ability. So practice solving math problems as well. Go back to, if you're an older guy, if you're in my age group in your 30s, time travel back to high school class in Algebra 1, Algebra 2, and Geometry. Start there and start revisiting some of those problems you had to solve in those subjects. And I'm telling you, it will just add even more to your ability in your current coding practice right now. No doubts about it. So what this does, okay? Oh, this is a combination of everything I have written here, especially with the literature. It builds your stamina to examine code for debugging, builds your ability to analyze, it strengthens your eye to decipher others' written code. So when you're reading, like when you're going back and you're looking at that copy and pasted code, you'll be able to easily decipher what they written down, how they written it out, how they structured it, because when you're reading all these paragraphs, you can actually see how they actually structure their writing when it's including all these literary devices, this figurative language, how they're making and infusing humor into their written works. Like, that's the type of thinking that you actually need when it comes to coding. And I don't think that gets highlighted enough when you're doing and we are actually coding and programming. Okay. Increases speed to pinpoint specific coding errors. I spelled that wrong. Increases ability to copy others' code and modify for your own interest. Keeps you familiar with programming vocabulary parallels, which is in mathematics. Builds your creativity to find solutions. So when you're doing riddles, so when you're doing something such as riddles, you have to really think outside the box, because the answer to those riddles are non-linear. You have to really, that box that a traditional answer would be in, the answer to the riddle is completely outside of that. So that's, if you can continue to practice in solving those riddles, that will actually train you and bring your imagination into coding, which tends to be a dry area of expertise. It's not really fun. A lot of people don't even stick with coding because it can be dry and they feel like there's no creativity to it. But that really brings your imagination into it, where you have to like think and you have to visualize and see how the code is working, how to debug it, and all those sorts of things. So when you involve all these things, they really include your imagination, and that practice will carry over into coding. I'm telling you, give it a try. You'll see what I'm talking about. All right. Helps you to write your code with other coders in mind, which I don't think a lot of programmers, this is a practice I don't think a lot of programmers actually do. They just write the code for themselves and the code to work for the actual software or device they're on. But they have to consider that other people are looking at that code too, to be able to solve newer problems and to just be prepared. That's just what it really is. All right, so that is going to be the end of this little training, this little tutorial. Did I forget something? I know when I speak, I have a lot of gaps when I'm actually talking because I want to actually make sure that I'm saying the correct thing and that I'm providing sufficient information to you guys. But I really hope that you got a lot out of this very short training that I did today. So if I forgot anything or there was anything that you disagree with, please leave a question or suggestion in the comment section below, and see the link in the description for a supplemental article as well in terms of other learning strategies for coders. Share this online training and subscribe. If you're definitely watching this on YouTube, subscribe to my channel, dljworks. Of course, hit that notification bell for newer videos. dljworks web tutorials, online documenting, and vlogging. Thank you for watching. See you in the next video. God bless y'all.